a couple minutes late. I got accosted in the hallway here a second ago. Okay, so hopefully you guys and gals can hear me and see me okay. We were having some connectivity issues earlier with a previous class, so I just want to make sure that folks are good to go.
I can see you.
All right, cool. We are good, Emma. Awesome, thanks. Okay, so we have kind of a strange class structure here this semester. Almost half the class has another class right now. So we're going to do this mostly asynchronously this semester and a little bit synchronously. So hopefully everybody saw an email link to just a basic doodle poll to look at some different times other than 11 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, where we can get together for 45 or 50 minutes. I'm not seeing that being a huge sort of consistent thing throughout the semester, but there are a couple of class sessions where it really makes sense for us to have a synchronous discussion where we can at least see each other through Zoom. And of course, later on when the weather gets nice outside, see each other's wonderful unmasked faces at a safe distance in safe and very pleasant spring environs. So hi, welcome to Forestry 500. For those of you who I didn't see on Tuesday's chat. How are things going so far? Serious question. How's your semester going so far as fledgling grad students? Or not? All right, well, let me switch over to our course website view. And haven't had a chance to, I don't think everybody has responded to the doodle poll yet, so I'm not totally sure what that adjusted meeting time will look like. But in the meantime, our task is primarily to get just a couple of things done. So we have on the course website just a brief discussion with an example to kind of intro everybody's project and so forth. One thing that we want to do with you guys and gals here today, and then also online, of course, is to kind of go through the course's curriculum list, which is pretty beefy, as you would imagine, for a sort of all-encompassing introduction to graduate level research curriculum. So if you are by your laptop or on a tablet or something like that, maybe leave Zoom running in the background and switch over to the course website. Let's take a look at the syllabus together. So head on to mycourses.siu.edu. And if you click the content section, the first section of content is a couple of different formats for our syllabus. So a Word document and a PDF, just sort of depending on whatever computing platform you need. We find PDFs are a little bit faster and easier on phones and tablets. And of course, Word documents are beautiful on full-size laptops and your sick gaming rig desktop computer. And then I've got my example introduction for myself as used in the discussion section, which is on the communication section of our website. So I'll screen share here and show you where I am looking instead of just talking about it. All right. All right, so hopefully everybody can see this. The idea here is that we have, I accidentally hit the back button. We have a long list of stuff that we can talk about, but every year when we tackle this class together as graduate students and professors and your faculty mentors, your committees, some of you have hopefully formed your graduate committees. Other of you may not have had that chance yet. So that's another kind of graduate student administrivia kind of thing will help you navigate within the structure of this class if you haven't had a chance to do that already. All of this is kind of on our syllabus, so we'll pull that up. And you can either sort of follow along on the stream. It's a little bit hard to read text on Zoom, so maybe open up your own copy of the syllabus on your end. And the syllabus front matter, academic integrity, late assignments, stuff like that, rarely any kind of a problem in this class. This class is obviously folks who are already sort of self-sorted as a relatively high caliber of students attempting things at a graduate level. And we don't really have a lot of, we have barely any formal writing assignments for this class that are separate from your work as a grad student. So most of our assignments for this class are actually things that you need to produce anyway as a master's or PhD student, like your eventual thesis or dissertation proposal if you haven't written that yet. Things like an annotated bibliography and other common documents that you're absolutely gonna need to put together as a graduate student one way or the other in sort of a physical or field science, like here in the College of Ag and physical and life sciences. We have things like literature reviews. And so those are assignments for this class, but again, hopefully you are already starting on those, and the work that you've already put in fully counts for those assignments in this class now. So if you already have written your proposal, maybe you're taking this class, second or third semester in your 4 semesters as a master's student typically, or in your 6 to 12 to 15 semesters as a PhD student, you might already have some of this stuff. Copy and paste that forward. You really don't want to be spending separate and extra effort on those things for this class. Okay, so we'll make sure to get that message out to all the students who are not able to join us for the Zoom meeting here right now. So the asynchronous students for when we meet another time. But hopefully this will, this part of our discussion today is intended to try and reassure you that I'm not going to pile additional separate work on you for this class. Grad school is stressful enough, and things are actually weird this year, of course, with COVID-19 and all of that. So our task for the next kind of 20, 30 minutes or so is to run through fairly quickly the class topic section. So the majority of our syllabus, its length. The asynchronous students will have a chance to weigh in on this as well. We'll put up a discussion forum question for that. For us, we want to kind of run through this list of class topics with kind of a red pen and a highlighter on my end, and scratch out anything that's not going to help you, the 9 students taking this class right now, get across the finish line a year from now, 2 years from now, finishing up your thesis or dissertation. So we'll have different kind of research techniques and modes. And if you are not interested in those at all, and if none of your classmates are, then we'll just kind of skip that. Just a real brief mention so that you know, as a professional researcher and scientist following your successful launch into the career field, you'll be aware of those things, at least peripherally, and you'll know that they are extra tools kind of in your toolbox professionally if you ever want to take those up. Like how do you collect data from human beings physiologically or maybe socially, cognitively, that sort of thing. If you need to do so with a project that is mostly focused on wildlife biology or population dynamics or spatial dynamics of wildlife, it's good for you to kind of know that those other topics are out there. But again, we're not going to spend a ton of time on them in this class if everybody reports, I don't really need that for my thesis or my dissertation right now. So this class is above all fundamentally flexible and practical to your immediate needs as a graduate student. So one last note before we kind of get into the line by line class topics and decide what we want to keep and what we want to emphasize and what we want to redline out. Some of you are gonna have to head out on fieldwork this semester, like while this class is happening. And I'll typically get an email, a week before, the night before, saying, Dr. Park, I'm not gonna be in class because I'm gonna be in Borneo sampling trees or something. That's fine. Like, this class, like, we get it. Professors have all been through grad school. I went straight through for 5 years for master's and PhD, and it was a bit of a sprint at times, right? Sometimes our work can be not so much feast or famine, but sprint versus marathon. So interval training, the very worst kind of training, or the hardest maybe. So if you need to head out for a conference to present your work, awesome. Network hard. We'll talk about some good techniques for that. If you need to head out with some field work, awesome. Do good work. We'll talk about a bunch of techniques with that throughout the semester and so forth. And we will, we'll capture all of these online sessions. We'll upload them so that when you get back, or maybe if you have internet access out in the field while you're remote, no problem, good to go, and so forth. Okay, so any questions before we jump in with the class topics? Again, not everybody's here, so we'll do this asynchronously in the discussion forums online with the students who are not here today, but let's kind of get the ball rolling so they have some kind of an example of how this process works. Any questions before we do that though?
Seems pretty straightforward.
Okay, cool. Yeah, right on. This is intended to be, again, super practical and helpful and just common sense, but at a very high technical performance level, if that makes sense. So a lot of this we're going to refer to as professional hygiene. Like, what are the good habits and practices of a career researcher, of a PhD level research who is literally discovering or inventing out past the boundary of current human knowledge, which is really cool. Like, you get paid to expand human understanding beyond what it is. That's amazing. But it's also subject to some basic human limitations and considerations, and we want to be cognizant of all of that. So let's run through this. Pretty much everybody is going to put together some kind of a research proposal. Occasionally we have students taking this class who are doing a project or an internship and not a thesis dissertation type format. Is that anybody who's here online today? You're doing a project or an internship where you don't have to produce a research document like a thesis or dissertation. That's less common, but we want to be cognizant of that. So if that's a nobody, then I'm going to assume everybody needs to come up with some kind of a thesis or dissertation. That's a big process. So a thesis can be anywhere from, a super short thesis with all of its appendices and data tables and stuff like that might run 50 to 75 pages. A longer one, anywhere from 200 to 500, no joke. And dissertations are sort of the big brother or sister version of a thesis. So the first step in that whole process is, of course, your research proposal. In some fields, it's called a prospectus, but it's really kind of the same thing. So this class pretty much always, we end up going through the template of the sections in order. What do you put in each section? How do you write each section? How do you organize this huge, massive information in your literature review? Like, where do you start? How do you know when it's enough, in terms of length or detail or conceptual saturation? We'll go through all of that stuff. So that's a pretty good deal. Along those lines, we want to get you set up with your lab notebook. So I'll talk about that, what that is, probably towards the end of our time today, and then post that online as well. Your project checklist. So this is not a document that you need to put together. This is one that previous grad students and I kind of worked together over the past decade or so to try to get in a single, I think it's currently a Word document, a single document, just all of the little nitpicky stuff that you got to do, organized basically in order by semester, so that you know some sense of what's coming. Like, when should I start planning to present my research at a professional conference? When should I start applying for jobs? How much lead time do I need to give myself for that? Most likely, when do I need to put together stuff like my plan of study or course of study, as it's sometimes called, the list of classes that you're going to take as reviewed and vetted by your graduate committee? When do I need to put my committee together? Am I way behind on that, or am I totally good to go? So that project checklist is something I'll provide to you guys, and little bits of it change here and there. Things like the graduate school will move its deadline for applying for graduation a little bit each semester. Sometimes they'll change little requirements about stuff like where do you submit your reviewed and defended and amended thesis or dissertation document for public archiving and the benefit of all humankind, stuff like that. But those are little changes. The basic major set pieces don't really change. So that'll be hopefully a useful document for all of us. But we want to go through that together as a class as the semester goes to kind of vet and make sure that none of our targets have moved on that checklist. So we'll see that a little bit more next week. Getting into the week 1, session 2 part of our syllabus and the curriculum. We want to probably spend a little bit of time talking about kind of the basic underpinning sort of design of science, if that makes sense as a term. The philosophy of science. We have a separate section for ethics of research. We almost always keep the ethics and research paradigm sections in, not because they're gonna directly sort of tell you what to write in your introductory paragraph of your dissertation or your thesis, but it helps you kind of know how to think about thinking. So metacognition, how to think about science, how to think about science versus technology versus application versus science communication, and so forth. If anybody is particularly opposed to the research paradigms and ethics sections, let me know in chat. That's okay. We'll kind of take it under advisement as we go. The annotated bibliography is basically going to be kind of the intermediate step between the stack of journal articles maybe that you've printed out or you have loaded in your Kindle e-reader or your tablet or whatever, for just understanding what the heck is my advisor asking me to do. That'll be a whole bunch of studies. We'll talk about how many studies is enough, where do you look for this stuff, how do you avoid paying like $50 per journal article, stuff like that, and so forth, legally, right? And so forth. And it sounds like everybody so far is doing a thesis or dissertation. So this is going to be a useful assignment for us. It's also a very flexible one according to your needs. Okay, so the research design part of week 2 or session 4 throughout the semester. This is maybe a little bit more useful for PhD students than for master's students, because at the master's level, generally picking up professional skills, sort of moving into a kind of a leadership, project management, leading a team of technicians more than being the technician, with an undergraduate degree and so forth. Research design is kind of supersetted on top of what most master's students are heavily into, and is squarely a target for PhDs. So PhDs are relatively few and far between versus the number of master's students, and certainly versus the number of undergrads. And they're the ones trained specifically to not run an experiment, but to create and design and invest in experiment with all of the things we can do to make it successful, effective, cost-effective, timely, ethical, all that stuff. So maybe show of hands in video, or click the raise hand icon or whatever. Show of hands, who is a master's student in this class among who's online? All right, so it's Ray and Steven. And Emma, are you a PhD student? No, master's? Yes, all right. Cool. So, well, maybe the research design stuff is useful. It's going to be useful for master's students, but we don't need maybe to spend a whole lot of time on it, kind of land real hard on it, unless we have a pretty big cadre of PhD students relative to our class list. So we'll keep that one pretty short, and so forth. Let's see. Research design continues. There's a bunch of stuff. Again, we'll go through it, but I won't spend a lot of your time on it because we have a lot of practical things to get rolling, like early this spring for master's students. And getting into about week 4, kind of the session 7 and 8 section of it, we do want to maybe talk a little bit more about kind of the underpinning thought on measurement, which is the more formal term for setting up data collection, collecting data, and knowing how to treat the data before you get into stuff like statistical analyses or content analysis for non-statistical social data. So among the folks who are online, just real briefly, folks are still kind of catching up with the introduction online with the discussion forum. Are you guys doing like physical outdoor field science projects, or are they socially focused, like qualitative, semi-structured interview type things? Let's have a quick chat together in voice and in text, if that's appropriate for you, about kind of what your style of data collection is going to be, maybe even later this summer, or starting kind of partway through this semester. Collecting a bunch of numbers, collecting a bunch of spatial information, a bunch of human cognitive stuff like surveys, interviews, physiological information from sampled organisms. What kind of data are you guys and gals looking at so far? And it's also okay to say, I don't know what my project is yet. I just started as a grad student. We're still kind of hammering this stuff out. Totally fine. All right, sound off. What kind of stuff are you guys and gals working on?
I'm doing only physical things. I'm measuring water quality.
Awesome, cool. There are some well hashed out procedures and equipment and so forth. Very cool. All right, Ray, how about you?
I'll be doing mostly survey data.
Okay,
I'm pretty
right
sure
on.
it's all survey data.
Excellent. So one good thing about that, there's a lot of surveys out there. One bad thing about that is there are a lot of surveys out there, and it can be hard to know like what are the good techniques to adopt and absorb, and what are some ones to stay away from. So we'll go through some of that stuff for you.
Okay.
Emma, how about you?
One thing I did.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh,
Right.
sorry. Oh, I just wanted to say, Dr. Akamani has got me doing a literature review right now, and we're going to be using the literature review to build the survey.
Yep, absolutely.
No.
That is
that pretty common?
Yeah, that's the wise way to do it. And that makes,
Cool.
as weird as it sounds, like doing this hard work on the front end is going to make writing and analyzing your data and writing your thesis on the back end of things, like a year from now, so much less stressful, because building stuff out of the previous work lets you compare, hopefully apples to apples, but at least like apples to palm tree. And you can kind of triangulate off of previous studies to the extent that they're similar or inform your work. So I'm excited for your study. It's you're in good hands with Dr. Akamani, of course. All right, so Emma, just real quickly, what style of data are you collecting for your project?
I'm also collecting physical samples, water and soil, like Steve.
Awesome, very cool. We're going to use, surprisingly, some of the same statistical tools that Ray is with human attitudinal and perceptual and beliefs type data. When you translate those things to numbers, then we can apply some pretty sophisticated mathematics to it. And I hope that all of you are, if not excited about taking stats classes, at least at least able to grab a hold of just the handle into a gigantic tool set that statistics represents. I took over a dozen stats courses in graduate school between a master's and a PhD, and it's pretty painful at first. At least it was for me. I'm decent at math, but I'm not really, like, that's not what gets me out of bed in the morning, but it is an incredibly powerful set of tools. But with all power comes responsibility. There are lots of ways to misuse stats. So hopefully your stats classes help you kind of grapple with that, and we will as well in this class. Okay, Maggie, how about you? What style or type or flavor of data are you collecting for your thesis?
I'll be collecting soil and vegetation data.
Awesome, cool. All right, is anybody, so you're gonna have a ton of sample data. Is anyone collecting geospatial data to kind of place soil and water samples, or even survey samples or human data, kind of place it on a landscape or in an ecosystem?
I am, but I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. I'm collecting the data for it, but I'm not sure if I'm using it within my project. But
Yeah, good.
no one has
Better
it
to
in
have
that.
and not need. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I like taking it.
Yeah, for sure. And you got a bunch of sophisticated tools for that as well. But for some students, it does mean picking up not an unrelated, but kind of an adjacent skill set. So there's the, water quality. What are the geochemical contributions? What's maybe the non-point source runoff contribution to what we're finding in these Nalgene grab sample bottles or suction lysimeter bottles or whatever. But then switching context from those graphical and statistical tools to like mapping tools and stuff like that, it can feel like, man, I got to learn 2 whole sets of statistics. And yeah, that's pretty much true. Okay, so let's keep the measurement section. Does anybody have to design their sampling strategy or approach to make sure that it is statistically representative, or is that work pretty well done for you? It's also okay at this point if you're not sure, like you just haven't had that conversation yet with your advisor. Like, does your advisor already have this kind of hammered out for you, or is this something that you are sitting down and designing? Let me know. So do we want to spend time on non-probability and probability sampling, or not so much?
I know my
Can't
study's
remember.
already designed for me, or the sampling for the most part.
Okay. Anybody else? You guys are all so
I would
polite.
imagine that Dr. Akamani is going to have me do some of that for our
Okay.
sample.
Right on.
I'm not sure though. I can't say we've specifically talked about it.
All right, cool. Sampling can be really, intimidating. Now, Ray, I don't know if you guys know him very well yet. He's a very bright guy, so he may not feel particularly worried about this. But for some folks, they find kind of taking on the whole wide world and distilling that down into a functional and representative, like a survey sample, is incredibly tricky to do. If you were following the election 4 years ago, and pollsters just trying to make sense out of the chaos of polling data from what they were trying to make as representative as possible nationwide samples, it's tough. So again, Kofi is pretty darn skilled and experienced in this stuff. You'll be good to go. But okay, so we'll keep it in there, but maybe keep it pretty short and maybe even optional for the folks who definitely don't need to go through that stuff. So this is an important maybe structural note for this class. If for any reason you're 100% sure that you're definitely never going to use any particular part of our curriculum, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you just kind of quietly skip that part. That's going to be okay, really. You guys are adults. This is graduate school, and we don't need to take everybody through sort of goose stepping and lock marching along. We can choose some good paths through. Okay. Looks like I skipped around a little bit. All right, sampling, research design. We'll talk a little bit generally for the modalities section. That's usually fast and light because everybody's doing some pretty different things. But I'll help try to explain, hopefully with some different kinds of examples than are useful in like a statistics class that you got to take. Those are very tightly coupled to the equations that you're learning that week in your stats class. We'll do kind of a higher level buffet or survey of, you know, how do we think about and set up the independent versus dependent parts of it? What about replication, blocking and factors, split plots? I have a paired watershed study that I'm supposed to go to, so I need to find two watersheds next to each other. Well, maybe they don't have to be physically touching, but they got to be similar in some important ways. So we'll help kind of piece that together for you a little bit. Ray, you're our survey guy, so we'll keep that in. And what is Taryn's research data type? Is she working with Kofi as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, no. She'll be collecting physical data with Dr. Zajac on the giant canes,
Okay,
research
cool.
plots, and then also the lake studies.
Right on. Is most of you guys here, Ray, you are possibly doing a little bit of this, but probably not if it's a survey. If anybody is doing qualitative field research, like semi-structured interviews where you have a conversation with someone, your data source, and the goal here is not to have a huge sample size, but to get deep, rich, quality interview vocal data. Is anybody aware that you're going to be doing any of that? You might be able to mostly zap that section. Okay, we'll go with that. Depending what the others say on the discussion forum. Let's see. Modalities. Those are also largely qualitative. Okay. We should definitely spend some time this semester talking about like field research protocols. So this is like the recipe or laundry checklist, so to speak, of what you're actually doing kind of moment to moment out in the field. And we'll have some pretty hilarious learn from my fail type stories in the ethics section with weird Nazi experiments. And then also here with folks who are just like, they're just trying to get their graduate research done. And then there's a grad student I was with at Virginia Tech whose laptop was stolen and all her data was on there. And it cost her 4 years. She had to start her PhD project over. 4 years. So we'll talk about stuff like automated offsite secure data backup. So you don't have to remember to do it. And so that some numbskull trying to parse out your laptop and so forth isn't a problem. Okay, so we'll keep that stuff in. Let's see. Data collection, field logistics. What do you do when there are lightning strikes nearby? Just all of that and so forth. And then to the extent that we have time, let's do stuff like data processing. So how do you kind of that step in between out in the field, hot and sweaty, getting bitten by more seed ticks than you thought existed, and sitting at home in front of an SAS or SPSS screen, crunching your stats. There are things like quality control, error checking, data transformations to manage stuff like non-uniform variance across a data set, stuff like that. We'll try and kind of give you a working knowledge without going into a whole bunch of boring statistical details on that stuff. Like, how do you look through a GPS log and make sure that those points are trustworthy? And what does trustworthiness look like on a statistical basis? And so forth. Let's see. And then by the time we're into kind of week 9, session 17, kind of the back half of the semester, a lot of this stuff. So how would you use a univariate versus bivariate versus multivariate analysis? Are you setting yourself up for a factor analysis versus a structural equation model versus k-means cluster? We'll kind of talk through that stuff organically. And we'll do it in a much more sort of conversational format than me like telling you what to think, so that you can have a more functional understanding of those statistical tools without really getting into the equations of it, because that tends to be the intimidating part for a lot of people. Okay, cool. Any questions so far? We got about 5 minutes left on our time together that we've carved out so far. And again, we may adjust that with our doodle poll for the rest of the semester, but any questions? I don't want to get too far from anything that anybody, okay. So far, so good. Good, so let's kind of finish this out. You'll notice that our curriculum finishes with the technical aspects of research by week 10 out of 16, which leaves a good 40% of our semester for, being a human being, being a graduate student human being and not a slave laborer. So we also want to talk about things like how to represent both you personally as a researcher, scientist, a professional in your field, with science communication principles and stuff like that. So written and in person. So in front of a class versus in front of the general public versus online and social media, and versus a dedicated high skill professional audience of your peers and colleagues at your same level at a professional gathering or a training or conference or continuing education. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and this part of the class used to be a lot less important than it is now. But in the era of fake news and targeted misinformation campaigns by state level actors, like USA sending stuff over to Russia and Russian agents, farming out botnets of misinformation about vaccines here in the United States to foment unrest and gain an advantage. Like, it's 2021. This is the world we live in. So I'd argue that this, professional communication, science communication stuff might be increasingly useful. And hopefully we can put kind of an optimistic spin on it instead of a boring dystopia type spin. Throughout the semester, we'll have a bunch of different examples to kind of learn from some folks who are pretty okay at this. And it's very important that you guys get some intellectual cross-pollination beyond my perspective on things in this class. So one of our few assignments in this class that is not directly, literally copy and paste material into your thesis is going to be a brief on-campus or these days off-campus research seminar evaluation. So anything that is not in your particular technical field, you want to catch 2 presentations of a professor, a guest speaker that's brought to campus. TED Talks are a little bit thin on sort of crunchy technical detail at the level that we're going to be working as grad students, but things along those lines. So public science communication, that counts. We want to find what worked out well for them and what didn't work out well, for a total of a paragraph or 2 of kind of critical and reflective writing. So what did that person do so well? What did that person not do so well? What can I glean from this experience? So I want you explicitly to go to or find online safely some kind of a science communication, a research communication venue, and pick one that is not in your field, maybe one that you have no idea what the content is even about, so that you're not focused on the content of it. Like, we don't care what the specific results of that experiment was or what those were. We're looking to diagnose and kind of postmortem how they communicated it. Did they get complex ideas across to you with fidelity and faithfulness to the truth that they uncovered, but also accessibly in a way that you could immediately apprehend and digest meaningfully? We have some really pretty flexible assignment due dates in the last part of the semester. So for those of you who are starting to write your proposal, I'll help scaffold that process. We got detailed templates. We got a detailed timeline so the work of the whole thing doesn't pile up on one horrible Red Bull and kidney stone fueled weekend, and so forth. So I'll break out our big assignments throughout the semester and continuously sort of coach us through those so that you feel like you have a wingman for that process. Technical writing is completely different than prose. Many of the things that you were taught in your high school and undergrad English classes and composition classes, bad idea, genuinely bad idea for technical writing. So we'll talk about sort of the broad stuff with that and help you get through the specifics, okay? All right, that's pretty much our season. And very commonly we don't even meet for a period in April. We may end up doing that this year because COVID kind of spreads things out and slows things down a little bit with online, but that's okay. We'll get through. All right, so in our last 1 minute here, anything that you thought or hoped would be on this list, but that is not, I am very happy to adjust this to more closely reflect your needs. There's a lot of stuff on there and it's awesome. I'm super excited about this class. I love this class, but if there's anything else that we can put in there, let's do that. So as we're kind of winding down here, feel free to toss in any ideas or put them on our course website in the discussion area.
I can't think of anything, but maybe as the semester rolls by, we'll think of something to change or something like that. But
all right, sounds good. So that's a standing invitation. Please don't be intimidated or think that you're inconveniencing me or your classmates by adjusting this. We want to genuinely tailor this to help you get through as best you can. All right, cool. That's that. I'm over by about 1.5 minutes, so we better stop this thing so you can get to your next class. Thank you very much, and I'll transcode this, upload it, get the online discussion rolling as well. Okay. We'll see you guys when we see you, maybe next week.
Thank you. I'll see you later.